Howdy everyone, this is a quick demonstration of how to work with mockup files. So I've put together an example folder here, but you will be working with, for the sake of the book covers, you will have this book mockup folder that you're working with. These kinds of files can be found online, a lot of them for free for commercial use, but most of them are set up in a very similar fashion. So this one, for example, you'll see there's a couple different files in here. There's JPEGs showing you what each of the mockups are. So for example, the second option is going to look like this JPEG here. This is the Photoshop file that you're going to be editing. And then there's this angle of the shot as a preview, and then that has its own Photoshop file. Okay, so I have already gone ahead and created my cover, spine, and back, but to go through that process, so I have them set up each on individual artboards here. You may have yours set up differently. You'll just need to split them up for this process. It's usually easiest to work with static images or PNGs for these mockup files. So to get those in Illustrator, I would go to File, Export, Export for Screens, and then if this tab is on Assets, I like to export from the Artboards folder, and then you'll see that each one of my artboards will export as a separate item. If you have not, this is a good place to name your files what you want them to come out as, so name your artboards what you want them to be. Over here is where these will end up. So I have already placed these in my cover folder. And then your options here are the different file types that you might want to export as, and then the scale. I like to leave this create subfolders unchecked, or else you're going to get separate folders for each file type you export, which can be handy if you're like doing a bunch of different exports, but for the most part, for our case, we're just going to be using one, so I leave that unchecked. So then if I click export here, these will end up where I exported them to. I'm going to delete these because I already have them in another folder. Okay, so once we have those as images, I'm going to go ahead and open up one of these mockup files. So, for example, let's just work with the cover here, and you'll see it ends up as this Photoshop file, and then you have a couple different layers over here. So Photoshop files work in kind of a nested fashion, where a lot of times you'll have these what are called smart objects. A lot of the things in here you can ignore because those are effects placed to make this look realistic. What you really want to look for are wherever that smart object is that is the actual image of the cover. So in our case, it's in this cover folder. You can see this little icon here. That is an icon telling you that this is a smart object. And actually, we might be able to change it up top here. Let's see what happens. So if you double click on this, this will open up that file in a new tab. And then any changes you make here will be mapped onto this file here. So for our case, let's go ahead and pull in my book cover. So I'm going to pull in my cover image. You'll see because I have that set up at the correct scale, this sizes nicely and it perfectly covers our mockup. I'm going to go ahead and hide that just in case. Now, this won't change yet, but once I hit Command S or I go to File and then Save, when we flip back over, you'll see that my image has been mapped onto the mockup here. So in this case, this one would be done. I would just go ahead and File, export that as a PNG is okay. And then I'm going to place that in this folder. I'm going to name it something that makes sense, like cover mockup. Okay, let's move on to a slightly more involved one. So I'm going to save this so I have it. I'm going to close these. That one we'll move on to next. But first, let's do the second mockup file, which has the cover, the spine, and the back. And you can see, just like the first one, we have these smart objects for each individual image here. So we're going to go in and edit those individually. So I double-clicked on the back cover. I'm going to pull up my back cover here, drag and drop that to place it, or you can go to File, Place, confirm that placement, and then I'm going to hide their example. Oh, looks like their back cover template is slightly larger than what I have here, so that's okay. What I'm going to do is hold Alt and zoom in, and then I'm going to hold Alt or Option again, just as I barely scale this up so it scales from the center, and I make sure it covers all edges of that smart object. That looks good. I'm going to go ahead and hit Command S to save this, and then you'll see that over here the back cover has updated. I'm going to go ahead and do the same with the spine. And again, this one needs scaled just slightly, it looks like. So you see what happens here when your items aren't exactly the right dimensions is you have to do some work in the mockup. For this case, this isn't too big of a deal. I'm just going to scale that in slightly. Okay, that looks good. So it's scaled a little bit. If I wanted to, I could go back and take the exact dimensions of this and edit that in my Illustrator file, or actually create this in here. But for the sake of this demonstration and for this design, this isn't too bad. So once I save that, you'll see this is mapped onto the mockup cover. Ooh, looks like that top didn't cover. So you'll see that's why that black was showing through. That looks better. And then let's do our cover again. Throw that on there. So that one looks good. And then save it. And there is our second mockup that shows the cover, the spine, and the back. So I would go ahead and export this. Maybe something like cover mockup 2. And then in that folder, we'll have our exported images as PNGs. Next, I'm going to move on to mockups for the social media part of this project. If you're not here yet, that's okay. Just hold off on watching this until we are at that part of this project, but I'm going to do this all in one shot so that you can come back and revisit this as you need to. So this file is set up a little bit differently. This came from a different source. So you can see that we don't have immediate access to the things we want to edit. There are also a lot more items to edit if we wanted to. So I'm looking over here in my layers panel. I see that this is the smart object. So if I actually, let me clean up my Photoshop here and clean up my workspace. Okay. So if I double click this, it opens up a new smart object that says your preview here, and this is what's mapped onto the phone screen. But within here, there are a bunch of separate items to edit. So we can edit our profile picture here, and this is its own smart object, you see, so this is what's being mapped there. And then the individual posts are in these line items. So if I go to post 1, I double click on this. Let me back up to my social folder, and I pull in post 1 here, and then save it. You'll see that it updates here, and then if I save this one, it will also update here on the phone screen. So I'm going to quickly go through that for these other posts, just so you can see that in action. So as long as you've already done all the work, this stage of creating the mockup should be fairly fast and fairly easy. So that next row is on line 2. And we're only doing 6 posts for our case, so you won't have to fill out these last 3, or you could repeat some of your posts for the sake of making your mockup look nice. Okay, we're just about done here. Okay, so I'm going to make sure I save this, and then if you wanted to, you can see that things like the post numbers and the account name are just text layers that you could come in here and edit if you wanted to. And then once you save all that, that will update in your actual mockup. So it puts your designs in context. Same with your book cover. You can come here and export this as a PNG, and you should be all set.